will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 87 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, we recently held a public meeting in Purley where we were joined by Howard Cox, the Reform UK candidate for Mayor of London in next year's election. Up next is a recording of the chat I had with Howard. So firstly, Howard, thank you ever so much for coming along to, I normally say sunny Croydon, but I can't say that
It's a huge pleasure.
This evening, but you know, it is October, so you know, global warming is perhaps not what it's made out to be at this moment. Absolutely. So thank you. So just have a little chat really about why you're running for the mayoralty and sort of a bit about your background really. So you currently run the Fairfield UK. Sort of what got you involved in that, and what's been your achievements, do you think, as part of that?
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for allowing me to come and talk to you. Really, it's a pleasure to be here. My name's Howard Cox, and about 8 months ago, I had no idea I was standing for London Mayor. But a certain Nigel Farage and Richard Tice called me because they seemed to be quite impressed with some of my public affairs campaigning I've done since 2010. And let me explain. My background is that I marketing and communications, and I hate this couple of words put together, management consultant. We hate those, don't we? But I was helping small businesses to trade through their difficulties, whatever they had, and really trade by growing rather than by cutting costs. So in terms of communication and marketing, that's the way to do that. And I had one particular business that I worked for over in North Kent, was a trucking firm with 50 trucks. And one day I was sitting with the boss there who was fundamentally scared stiff of actually saying going bust. And I said, let's go through the figures then. We looked at his profit and loss, looked at his balance sheet and all the things. And there was one particular line that stood out. Fuel costs, diesel costs. And 43% of his costs was diesel. He had 50 trucks. He had about 30 drivers, and he had some temporary drivers as well. And so staff cost was a lot less than the cost of the diesel. And the worst thing about this for me at the time was 70% of those costs went to the government in tax. And I said to the boss, for the sake of argument, call him Peter. I said, Peter, I didn't realise this sort of magnitude of taxation. And he said, well, we've tried to do something about it. The Road Haulage Association every year sends a letter to the Treasury and says, please don't increase fuel duty. So did the Freight Transport Association, which is now called Logistics UK. They did the same thing. But they never spoke to each other. And a very disparate sort of campaigning group, or a set of campaigning groups, actually didn't get anywhere. So I said, why don't we set something up? And to cut a long story short, we gave birth to Fairfield UK. I got the RAC, I got the RHA and FTA to actually put some money into funding this project. And at the time, you probably remember, it was around about those horrible riots in Croydon, that's what I remember. David Cameron actually introduced a thing called an e-petition. And this e-petition was whereby if you got 100,000 people that signed up to your e-petition, you'd have a debate on the House of Commons floor. Well, we were the first ones to do it, Fairfield UK. And that was achieved in the early days of when social media was actually social media that I could actually understand. And what I mean by that is that nowadays, an e-petition now, you can have an e-petition for a one-legged lesbian grasshopper. Let's protect it. That's the sort of thing. And people are really campaign apathetic and fatigued by all these petitions. You know this, what's grown up in the last 30 years. But at that time, it was very much a major part of my armoury to actually do some campaigning, and we got 100,000 supporters in the space of 10 days, and I went through probably about 14 bottles of Barolo getting them, sitting in front of a computer with Facebook and Twitter. That's all there was then. There were some other things, I don't know what it is, and but that's how we did it, and we finally got that debate. But I also, because of that, alerted to a lot of MPs, Tory MPs, one of them who is a dear friend, a guy called Robert Halfon MP. You may have heard of him. He's actually currently a minister for scholarships and apprenticeships and things like that. So he can't really help me anymore. But he became Mr Fairfield UK in Parliament. So the combination of actually getting good support, backbench support, and we got about 140 backbench MPs on board. It wasn't difficult to say, look, stop screwing the motorists. We're the highest tax drivers in the world. It's screwing truckers, it's businesses, you name it. Well, why are we doing this? And at the time, there was a certain thing Cameron and Osborne inherited, was the fuel price escalator. And that was a Gordon Brown baby. In fact, it goes back to a Tory invention, but Gordon Brown jumped on it, which fundamentally said that at every budget and every statement, spring and autumn, and sometimes they're called budgets, mini-budget, I haven't got a clue, we've got one on November the 22nd coming up. Fuel prices go up by inflation plus 2 pence. Now, had that escalator stayed in place, you'd be paying 70 pence more at the pumps for diesel and petrol now. What I'm proud to say, and one of the questions we spoke about earlier, is what I've achieved. The combination of a lot of things, it's not just me, because we've got 1.7 million supporters now. What we achieved was actually a freeze in duty since 2011. In fact, Osborne actually reduced it because of our pressure in March 2011 by a penny. Doesn't sound a lot, but that was a major thing, considering it was going to go up by 5p per litre. So there was a net swing of 6p. And if you remember rightly, about a year or so ago, when Rishi was still Chancellor, he cut it by 5p. So we've actually gone down by 6p per litre, and that's the contribution to the economy. And that was achieved also by actually using objective campaigning. And I work very closely, it costs a lot of money though, with independent economists. One group called the CEBR, which is the Centre of Economic Business Research, did several reports to show what would happen if you keep increasing fuel duty. Common sense in this room will tell you it will bugger up the economy, but we had to prove it. You have to do that sort of thing. So for the last 13 years, we've had every single budget we've had a freeze in fuel duty, and that's down to the Fairfield UK campaigning, 1.7 million supporters. And by the way, what they do is I always ask our supporters, please could you contact your MP, will you support this? Suddenly Fairfield UK has become a bit more popular in the last, because we've got an election next year, and every constituency there are about 2,000 to 2,500 supporters of Fairfield UK. So in marginal seats, I can have a little bit of sway when I ask them, please, write to your MP and say we support cutting fuel duty. There is the other aspect that also we introduced. Am I going on too much? Are you okay?
No.
It's not just the taxation. It's about 50% now taxation, now as opposed to 70%. One thing I'm sure you get very angry about it, there's VAT on the fuel duty as well, the double taxation, and frankly it pisses me off every time I say it. How dare they do double taxation? It's totally immoral, but it's not illegal, because it happens in lots of other marketplaces. The other half of the equation, of course, is the commercial sector. The fuel supply chain, the oil companies, all the way down to, Mr. Bloggs who runs his corner pet garage with 2 pumps. That's been totally unchecked. It's like the Wild West. You know about pricing. Pumps, you can go down one road, you go to Tesco's down there and it's X, you go to Tesco's down, it's X plus 5p. And at the moment, I brought it to your attention because today we had a walk-in reception for MPs, and I do it every year, this thing, where I ask them to say, just before a budget or an autumn statement, we ask MPs, where do you stand on particular policies? Obviously fuel duty, and most of them people turned up were Tories today, a couple of Labour and about 3 SNPs, no Lib Dems, and certainly not Caroline Lucas, bless her. But in terms of that, we simply ask the question, what do you want from the next budget or statement? Do you want to cut fuel duty, continue to freeze, or do you want to raise it? Well, something like 60% of the people turned up want to cut it, and everyone else said freeze it. But we also asked the question about, you probably remember recently in July, the Competitions and Market Authority backed that we should have some sort of consumer price regulatory scheme. Well, that's down to our campaigning again, a thing called Pump Watch. which we asked for. We've got Ofcom, we've got Ofwat, we've got Ofgem. Why haven't we got it for 37 million drivers? 37 million drivers who all vote, or could vote. And the clues in what I said just now, we're a year away from an election. Suddenly, the government is starting to realise, oh, drivers might be important to us. So let's move the 2030 ban to 2035. And things like that has just recently happened. Have you noticed? Those are the sort of things happening. But today, it was, I think, Nalin will actually back me up, it was quite successful. There was a
It
lot
was
of...
very successful, and the thing that really struck me was the fact that the MPs were walking in, and you're saying, oh, good that you've come here. And they look at Howard and say, well, all my constituents are emailing me, and they know it's because of Howard. So actually, it bloody works. It really does. They have no choice but to be there because they want to get voted in there.
And that's what's going to happen as well. But the pump watch thing is very important to me because it was promised in July. And what happened is Grant Shapps at the time, he's now Minister of Defence, he actually got all of the big oil company bosses around the table and all of the supermarket bosses who sell petrol and diesel around the table. And he asked them, how are you going to voluntarily run pump watch? And we expect them to come back and say, we're going to do this. Still nothing's happened. We're still getting unchecked pump pricing. We're ridden roughshod. And of course, it's because of the Ukraine. And guess what? It's going to be now to do with the Middle Eastern situation. Any excuse, all we ask from Pump Watch, we want every garage to make a decent profit and a decent living. Got no problem with that. Great. But just make it transparent. When oil prices go up, right? They go up, the pump prices go up like a rocket. You've heard this. When they go down, they come down like a feather, and usually not by the same amount, and a lot slower than you expected. Those are the sorts of things. So I'm still campaigning hard, obviously, to cut fuel duty. I still think we could cut it. In fact, one of the things we proved to all of the chancellors, and we've had a shed load at the moment over the years, we have proven to them that if you do cut fuel duty, it benefits businesses, jobs, investment, all the sorts of things you expect, and it puts more money into people's pockets to have a bit more disposable income, they spend it. So guess what? The whole of the economy benefits. But why don't they see this? We want to lead the way on net zero, don't we? We want to lead the way on other virtual signalling bullshit and all the other things. So why don't we lead the way on cutting actually consumer taxes? Why don't we do that and see what happens? I actually said today to one MP who actually liked the idea, why don't we just try it for a year? Cut fuel duty for 20p. For 1 year. We did it, didn't we, years ago for VAT, we cut it back. If you remember those days, we had an experiment, then it went back up and all the other. It was 17.5, 15, and now it's 20. And again, to cut a long story short, they haven't got any common sense and understanding. They're scared of this. Now, I know Jeremy Hunt quite well, or I wouldn't say quite well, I suppose reasonably well. But 5 years ago, when he wasn't actually in government, sitting in cabinet, not a chancellor certainly, and he's been all sorts of things, he's done a lot. But I met him at one of these events we had today, and he came in, signed the thing, and said, we must cut fuel duty, it's good for the economy. And you couldn't believe it. He said, are you sure about that? He said, yeah, no problem, signed it, you can tell all my constituents. He's now Chancellor. I regularly remind him of that, and I send him the picture of the thing he signed. Needless to say, he doesn't talk to me much these days. So that's what happened, and really the campaigning thing is very important to me. I'm not a petrol head. I actually believe that we need to have clean fuel technology. We need to breathe clean air and all the other bits and pieces. But it's not a major issue. It's not a major problem. What we should do is having clean fuel technology, all of this, hydrogen, synthetic fuels, e-fuels, all sorts of things we can do. Fuel catalysts, for example, in Texas and a lot of the states in America, it's a legal requirement to have fuel catalysts delivered in bulk deliveries to the forecourt. So when you fill up your car, you've got it in it. It's, you've seen the Ultras and the Supremes here, which is a rip-off because most of them are just detergents they put in them. But these fuel catalysts halve emissions, right, and increase fuel efficiency by 10%. It's a no-brainer. So why are we doing it? No. Guess what Grant Shapps do? He introduced a thing called E10. Let's put some more ethanol in there and bugger up your seals of your cars and also reduce your economy or fuel by 3%. Where's this information coming from? Unfortunately, it's coming from people that are totally uninformed, clueless, and do not understand road user transport. And that brings me on to this statement. Has there ever been a long-term road user transport strategy? Ever? We have a 4 to 5 year parliamentary system, and everyone wants to go. We know that Labour want to bring back to 2030. when they get elected next year, and they will win. Whether we like it or not, Labour are going to get in. How much by, I don't know. And I spoke to 2 or 3 of the Tory MPs today. He said, "Oh no, we're." I said, "Honestly," and they looked me in the face. We don't know. I'm afraid most of us, and I've voted Tory for 50 years of my life, except once I voted for that guy you talked about the musical, Tony Blair, because I wanted to get rid of John Major because at the time because it was a terrible time. I regret it. I do. Yeah. But for every single every single election I've always voted Tory. Councils, parishes, locals, national, you name it, I've done that. And I was quite close friends with a certain Boris Johnson as well, you know. I won't talk about that one at the moment. But the point I'm trying to get across is people are now fed up to the back teeth of the Tories. In fact, they're not Tories, are they? They're Tory in name. We didn't do it. We don't have a small state, low taxes, you know, and all we can say is, and it's coming on to the reason why I joined Reform, is that you can't tell the difference between Labour and the Tories at the moment, especially on policies that are really going to impact us badly. And I bring on the 2030, 2035 story. I was with the Centre for Economic Business Research. They did an analysis of what would the 2030 ban cost the economy. No, the government hadn't done this, a cost-benefit analysis. So I asked them to do it. It cost us, Motorcycle Action Group, the Alliance of British Drivers in Fairfield, UK, it cost us £50,000 to do this report. It's a serious, in-depth report. And the CBR, especially the boss of it, a guy called Douglas McWilliams, was advisor to George Osborne, and he's also head of the CBI at one stage. We don't talk about it now because they've gone all a bit funny. But let me ask you this question. Imagine you're the Minister of Transport, something, or let's put maybe Chancellor of the Exchequer, and I'm a little spad, a special advisor that comes to see you and said, guess what? 2030 ban, do you know what? We're going to get £80 billion worth of benefits, green benefits. He said, wow, are we? That's fantastic, you'd say, wouldn't you? How much is it going to cost? 400 billion. 5 times the alleged benefits. And that's one reason why he's moved it on. I've actually had some emails from the Treasury and his office to say, thank you for the report, we did take it on board. Those are the sorts of things we're not getting across in terms of the common sense. And of course, the big one at the moment, which is going to cost trillions, is net zero. And
so before we go on to net zero,
well, I wasn't going to go into it, but go on.
If we must, because of course here in Croydon, we're now in the outer London area.
Yep.
You've discussed about policies that maybe make sense and policies that don't make sense, and talked about road transport. Plan is you're standing for Reform
Yep.
UK as the mayoral candidate next year. On day one, what are you going to do about ULEZ?
Well, it's very simple. It's a classic thing. All of ULEZ is going, not just the extension, the whole bloody lot. And I'm going to walk into the ULEZ office, and they're obviously going to know about it if I am elected. Sorry, when I'm elected. If I walk into that, I'm going to say, thank you very much, Steve, for your service. Here are your P45s. Bye-bye. We're not going to go through with it. Also, all of the ULEZ expansion fines and fees from August the 29th, which is just gone, all the way to May the 2nd, will be refunded. Every single bit of it. I know you're thinking how much that's going to cost, because I'm not a one-trick pony, because we've got a lot of good stuff on crime and affordable housing as well. But in terms of that, that's the first thing I'm going to do on day one. And it is, I think it's quite a popular solution to in terms of getting people's votes. Yeah, please.
Would the congestion charge go as well? Or
Well, that's a brilliant question, and I'm not going to avoid it. I want to get rid of it, personally. But I've been advised by some very senior economists, look at what it does and really what it's achieved and how much it brings in. And so I've got to look at the spreadsheet, actually, what it's going to deliver and what is the prognosis, where we're going to be in 5 years with. Because I would like to get rid of everything to do with actually hitting the motorist in the pocket, particularly in terms of tolls and things. Because, as you know, we're being forced into the electric vehicle direction. And I'm not anti-electric vehicles, I just think they should compete with every other form of clean fuel technology. Why should they get the benefit? Why should they get subsidy? They don't pay fuel duty or taxes, etc. and they're absolutely subsidised to buggery in terms of in terms of manufacturing them. So, in answer to your question, I think you'll feel quite strongly that I want to get rid of it. But I can't come out and say I'm going to get rid of it yet.
And what about the LEZs?
All LEZ, all ULEZ will just go.
No, there's two different things. It's
No,
LEZ.
I know. The commercial side of it, commercial trucking side of it, all go. Richard Tice asked me for a period of about 6 months to come and stand as London Mayor, and I said no. Because I'm not a politician, I'm a campaigner.
Yeah.
And I always use this thing, people seem to quite like the way I say this. A politician is an anagram for dishonesty. and I can't handle dishonesty and the way things happen. I'm really pissed off something rotten by some good, solid backbench MPs who are not standing up to net zero and all the other things like the ULEZ and all those sorts of things. So from that point of view, Richard asked me, and then Nigel Farage was probably he rang me, he said, because I've known Nigel, I got drunk with him in a Mayfair restaurant during I think it was the European elections in 2015. And we put together a transport policy for at the time for his party, and one of the things was he'd cut fuel duty 20p. And guess what? Richard Tice said, you know, what we're going to happen with reform, we're going to keep that 20p cut promise. And that has been always the heart of my campaigning. But I did tell him quite categorically, I'm not a politician, I'm simply a campaigner. He said, go on, stand as mayor and take this bastard on. And I've had about 2,000-3,000 emails to say, please, would you do it as well, from our supporters. And since then, I've had about 40,000 saying, thank God you're going to do it. So it seems the right thing to do. I am old. I'm going to be 70 next year. I'm not as old as Biden. But the point is, you know, I'm not sure if I really want to be London Mayor, but I'm going to do it because I want to get rid of this evil, horrible, dishonest, pathological liar of a man.
Fair enough. It seems a worthy cause. I think we'd all probably agree on that. We've talked there about ULEZ. We've talked there about transportation, or personal transportation. As London Mayor, you'd have much greater responsibilities than just those things. I mean, recently in Croydon we focused on those. But another thing which affects Croydon and indeed other boroughs is crime. And we've recently had yet another terrible, tragic stabbing in Croydon. The Mayor has responsibility for the Met. What would you do about knife crime in London?
Well, firstly, say I'm so saddened by that. My brother lives in Croydon, and I spoke to him on the phone about this, and he was almost crying about this situation. He's a lot older than me too, but it's very simple. If you're caught carrying a knife, you go to prison for 5 years. No questions asked, that's it. Whatever the knife is, you go to prison. And secondly, I'd increase stop and search big time. I'm sorry, I'm not a right-wing Nazi fascist, as Sadiq Khan calls me. I'm a guy that actually believes that I would like my daughter to walk down the high street at night without, worrying about what's going on. And the third thing, we're going to introduce a thing called police access points. So we need more visible policing, but on a 24-hour basis. How many police stations have closed over the last 10, 20 years? We can't reopen those, it can't happen because most of them have been sold off to become pubs or whatever, those sorts of things. But what we will do is, these 24-hour outlets, supermarkets and McDonald's and places like that, we want to have police access points permanently manned inside them. And if you're thinking far ahead of what I'm about to say, there's shoplifting's become rife. How we finance this, I think most big business would finance it to have a permanent policeman. I'm not talking about a Doctor Who box or something like that type of thing, but why not? You could bring that with a bit of fun about it. But Tesco's, I should imagine, like to have a policeman permanently banned there who's got the power to arrest, power to carry a taser, all those sorts of things. Why not? So, and we do the same in McDonald's. I bring this home. I've got a 31-year-old daughter who happens to drive a 41-ton articulated truck. I'm quite proud of her that she's done that. We adopted her and she had special needs and she was riddled with heroin. when she was 14 months old. She was on methadone to wean her off, and she's really developed into a credible person. She's not academic, she's lousy. That she can hardly write a name, but Christ, can she drive a truck well and move it around. And she said only 2 or 3 months ago, she and her girlfriend were walking down New Cross on the High Street, and coming the other way was about 8 or 9 lads, all with hoodies on. I don't know what colour they were. This is not a racist statement, but she was scared. She crossed the road, and they crossed the road. She crossed the road back. They crossed the road, and she ran into the McDonald's, and the McDonald's was a drive-through one, so you couldn't get through to it. So she ran to the till, right, sort of thing, and they just shut the door, shut the thing off. Wouldn't it be great if she had somewhere to go to, that sort of thing? As it happens, she was fine. They carried on. It was not a problem. But it just brought it home to me. You know, I don't know. You've probably got examples of that. You know, people doing that. But it's scary walking around the place at the moment, even in broad daylight. Now, I was in Whitehall today, so was Alan, and I've noticed loads of young people carrying Palestinian flags. They went off to protest outside 10 Downing Street. Yet more. This is just like the Stop Oil protest and the Extinction Rebellion and something. There's another fashion for youngsters. They're being educated badly and they're not getting the true information, etc. So one thing I would also do, adding to the crime thing, is that every single school in London would have a policeman go and talk to them and educate about safety and what to do. When I grew up, it's a bit like the cycling proficiency tests we used to do, things like that. But let's get back to common sense things which people will support and care about. So, in answer to your question, we are going to have police access points. We're going to make sure that if you're carrying a knife, you're going to go to jail. And the other thing is we're going to do a lot more stop and search. I'm willing to take that on, even with the left wingers going to attack me absolutely relentlessly on those policies.
So, I mean, obviously, as the London Mayor, you could reintroduce or have more stop and search.
Yep.
You can potentially have these police located at these other places.
Yep.
It's a national government thing as to whether or not who goes to prison for what particular period of time. So that would be sadly outside of your control, but nonetheless.
Yeah, but we'd lobby like mad, and obviously, but having that position, you do have the most powerful politician in this country is Sadiq Khan. He has unilaterally can do anything. He ignores public consultation agreements. Consultation process results, he manipulates results, and he lies about health fatality data and all those sorts of things to get his policies through. The guy can do anything he wants. He's more powerful than Rishi Sunak in terms of getting policies through. As far as that one, you're dead right, but I would actually do a massive, like I'm doing campaigning, I'd lobby for that, and I think in terms of getting support for putting people carrying knives into prison and those sorts of things, I think we get a lot of support.
You said that Bobby's on the beat.
Exactly, more visible policing, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to triple the number of bobbies on the beat. Now, I don't know if you're aware, what percentage do you think, in London, at any one time, the number of bobbies who could be on the beat, what percentage at any one time are there on there?
On the pavement,
Yeah,
5%.
I couldn't have written it any better. That means 95%.
Yes.
No, but 5%. Well, you obviously, yeah, I was shocked.
I
at
know how
the-
many policemen I don't see on the pavement.
Well, that's right. When was the last time you saw one? They're sitting in their car trying to catch someone doing 22 mile an hour and 20 mile an hour zone. Yeah, 5%. Now, some people say, how are you going to, of course, we want to triple it. That will take it up to 15%. Because what we're trying to do is get those police out of behind the desk and stop sort of mob handing sort of people like Lawrence Fox. They had 8 policemen to arrest him and people like that. And yeah, he's an idiot what he did. But the fact is, they didn't need 8 policemen to do that. And stop them to actually policing things like on Twitter. Just because you say something on all those sorts of things. Let's get back to, and in all the anti-ULEZ protests I've done about 16 of them now. The policemen who've actually monitored the protests and things, I've gone up to them and said, "What do you want from your next mayor?" I said, "Get rid of this bloody bureaucracy and paperwork I have to do. I want to go out and meet people in the community and talk. Good old-fashioned Bobby community who knows the area, etc., like that." So that's what I'm doing. There's nothing incredible about the policies I'm recommending. I'm talking about common sense.
So you mentioned obviously policing. We've discussed the sort of crime and that sort of thing. I mean, the people here will be particularly interested in this, I'm sure. But in recent years, there's been and indeed in the last week, as you alluded to just then, there have been a lot of issues around protests in central London. Who is allowed to protest? About what are they allowed to protest? And how those protests, if they occur, how are they policed? What would be your position on the right to stage protests in London?
I'm all for people to have the right to peacefully and lawfully protest. If they break those things, if they don't do it peacefully and they don't do it lawfully, I'm afraid they will be arrested. And unfortunately, the police are scared essless, I won't say the full word, to actually do anything like this. And we've seen it with them gluing to roads, and you see that. I always remember that woman who trying to take her kids to school, and she just pushed them out the way. And yet she's now got a criminal record for doing that. It can't be right, that sort of thing. And I've spoken to many of these protesters themselves, and most of them don't know what they're protesting for. You go, as I say, it's a fashion. They go and jumping, let's jump on the next bandwagon. And most of them are middle class, youngsters who, have got money and everything. Most of them have got, called Tarquin or something like that. But in answer to your question about this, it's like I put out a statement, a press release for reform, about why the hell hasn't Sadiq Khan condemned the Palestinian, basically anti-Jewish sentiment, the hatred that's going on, and he hasn't. He comes back and says, "No, we should all get on together." If you notice, he's very clever how he does this. So he's trying to keep the Palestinian faction on side. But I'm pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-Israel. I've got no problem with that at all. I'm just anti-Hamas. And I think that's the problem. We can get onto the BBC in a minute about that one. But the thing is, in my press release, I would not have allowed that protest to take back, waving Palestinian flags provocatively, taking over the cenotaph. Did you see that? And all that sort of thing. All those sorts of things. And the police would have the powers to stop that. And how we do that? The problem we do have is lack of numbers. But the police have got to focus on actually stopping these things, preventing these sort of provocative approaches in life. If you want a protest, do it constructively. I could have easily held up London with trucks all the way around it to cut filtage. The RHA were willing to do this, put every major exit and entrance to London and block it with a truck. In the year 2000 they did that, if you remember the trucking people, they did do that. But I wouldn't do it. I did it based on getting grassroots support, who wrote to their MPs, and that's why we got 1.7 million, why we got a good reputation of that, and combined with objective economic analysis. And that seems to have worked. Because the worst thing about it is, if you piss off the public, and that's what's happened with, the oil people, the anti-oil people, they won't support your cause. Initially, they do. It's like the doctors going on strike and things like that. People are not so sympathetic to the doctors. We all clapped the NHS, didn't we? The nurses and things like that. They're not so sympathetic now, with a 7 million waiting list. But anyway, in answer to your question, I've rambled on a lot here. We'd have a tougher police force and we'd have more of them.